on to something new. Okay, so we are on to the plant structure unit. So we touched on plants in the previous unit, just talking about the kingdom Plantae. And now you're going to know a little bit about plants. Actually, how about more than you ever wanted to know about plants? Now, plants are kind of cool, but hopefully you're not pulling your hair out by the time you're done with this. It's a quick unit, so get through it, but there are some details that you need to know. So hopefully these mini lessons will help clarify any of those details. All right, so let's get going. I'm going to break section 1 into 2 parts. So let's go through kind of part 1. And I say, we meet again. By the way, I'm in the same outfit as I was because I just finished recording the biodiversity, and now I'm just going to do the plant stuff. Okay, so crazy weird pictures that I always find. You know me. I have no idea what this person is possibly doing. I mean, I know that they're doing like synchronized swimming, but is that for real? Oh my gosh. And crazy psycho baby. So anyways, we do meet again. You guys are stuck with me for another couple units. But out with the old, in with the new. So we finished up biological diversity, and now we're moving on, okay? Bye-bye. Out with the old. All right, so good old plant structure. We're going to talk about this in depth, and I'm going to go through a couple of these things that you see in this diagram, but I'm going to start off with some other things first, and then we'll get to kind of the details of each plant, okay? So a quick overview. So major organs of the plant, and then we're going to again retouch on this later on. So just know that, let the stuff sink in and we'll kind of come back to it. But you have the fruit here, a protective covering that surrounds the seed. That's what a fruit is. We eat that. That's why all fruits contain seeds. So if you're not sure if something's a fruit, does it have a seed? It's a fruit, okay? That's why tomatoes are considered a fruit. Flowers, they make the seeds or produce them. The leaf makes the plant's food via photosynthesis, okay? So that's really important, obviously. The stem carries the water and food to the rest of the plant. We're going to talk about how at the end of this quick lesson. And then, of course, the roots anchor the plant in place, absorb water and other minerals from the soil in order to nourish the plant and undergo photosynthesis and produce those fruits, those seeds, all that stuff, okay? So all those are kind of just a quick overview of the organs of the plant. So here's a blast from the past. Now we haven't talked about cells since basically biology A when we went over the plant cell. Okay, so hopefully you guys remember this. I'm going to quickly go over this because this comes into play again. Remember, plant cells are very unique in that they have a cell wall. So they not only do they have a cell membrane, but the cell wall is a very rigid barrier, okay? And it's important because it keeps a lot of things in, especially water. So these huge things right here are called vacuoles. Vacuoles store a lot of water, okay? Because plant cells need a lot of water. Not that animal cells do not, but there's a specific need for a lot of water and a lot of pressure, okay, so that those cell walls and the vacuoles hold that water in to keep that pressure, okay, because think about how tall plants are, some trees, all that stuff, how tall they are, they need that support, okay. Obviously there's a nucleus, there's cytoplasm, and then another thing is chloroplasts. The chloroplasts are those very special organelles that allow the plant to undergo photosynthesis, okay? They contain chlorophyll in there, and that's where that photosynthesis can take place, okay? So, just a little FYI, hopefully you remember that. Now the cool thing is plants have organization just like human cells, okay? Or humans in general. So when we look at kind of the cell, or should I say just like a cross-section of what the plant looks like, it looks very similar, and I know these are small pictures, but very similar to the animal cell. So it's really cool. You have kind of this cuticle, which is the kind of upper layer, the outer coating. You have the upper epidermis, and then you have epidermis down here, and then you have all these different kind of so-called organs. But really, they're more kind of the vascular system of the plants. And then in the skin, here's kind of a taking a chunk of our skin out and looking at what's in there. You see a lot of similarities. Okay, and then the same organization that we have as a human, where we start off really small with atoms, okay, and then we put atoms together and we have molecules. Molecules come together to form DNA and cells. Cells come together to form tissues right here. Tissues come together to form organs. Organs form organ systems. Organ systems form organisms, okay? You get the picture. Plants have kind of that same level of organization, okay? So I just want you guys to understand that. So there are two organ systems. So in a human, which we get to in the next unit, which is animal organization, we have tons of different organ systems. But the plant only has two, okay? Nice and simple, right? The chute system. Chute, okay? The chute system is above ground. It's composed of organs such as the leaves, the buds, the stems, the flowers, if the plant has any, okay? Because not all plants have flowers, and fruits, if the plant has any, okay? So that's the chute system, basically anything that's above ground. Pretty easy, right? Photosynthesis occurs within the chute system, so it's never going to occur below the surface because obviously what does it need? Sunlight, yes. So it has to be above ground, okay? In the stems or leaves is where photosynthesis is going to occur. Reproduction also occurs in the chute system, okay? Either in specialized spore-producing structures known as sporangia or in the parts of the flowers, which we'll talk about a little bit later when we get into the reproductive system of plants, okay? Here's the other system, the root system. I thought this was a really cool picture, by the way. This is actually just a negative of this tree, but this is actually really what the root system would look like of a huge tree like that. It is a very, very vast system, as much as the chute system. The root system is pretty much the same thing, but underground. So the root system includes the below ground parts of the plant, such as the roots, tubers, and rhizomes, okay? The root system anchors the plant into the soil. It also stores excess sugar that's made via photosynthesis, absorbs water and nutrients from the soil, which is really important, and acts in a vegetative propagation of the plant, okay? So it's really important for that plant growth. That root system has to be, really, really kind of spread out, depending on the kind of root system, because, here's a root system from a carrot, which is more of a taproot, okay? All right, so the wonderful and amazing stem. Now I have to talk these plants up a little bit, right? Because we're like, yeah, plants. We see them all the time. Cool. So I'm going to get excited about plants. So here are some major functions of the amazing stem. All right, long list, right? But absorbs water and nutrients, first and foremost. Anchors plant to the ground. Holds soil in place to prevent erosion. That's actually a really huge deal. When we don't have a lot of plants, there tends to be a lot of erosion in the soil, which is not a good thing for anybody, okay? So really, plants are really important for that piece alone. Protects the soil from bacteria, transports water and nutrients, provides upright support, essential part of the transport system, which we'll get to, the xylem and phloem, and function in storage and photosynthesis, and produces the reproductive structures and the leaves. So the stem is wonderful and amazing. To the plant at least, okay? All right, let's talk a little bit more about structure. So when we talk about the stem, we talk about nodes. They contain nodes. These are the attachment for leaves. So when you see that, you can see that there are attachments for leaves. Those are called nodes. The internodes is the region in between these. Inter meaning between. All right, so the internode. And then the buds, obviously, are those underdeveloped tissues that will come from, basically those nodes. So let's talk a little bit about plant growth, okay? Plant growth is very unique. We have a couple of terms that I'm going to go over. The meristems is the tissue that's responsible for growth, okay? The meristems are very, very important because if you don't have that healthy meristem, which is that tissue, then basically you're not going to have a lot of plant growth. And if you can't have plant growth, you're not going to reach kind of a mature state and that plant will die off, okay? So the meristems typically end up being in this kind of root area or kind of right above the root, okay? You have these undifferentiated cells in the meristems, which means they don't have a specific function yet, okay? Kind of like we have stem cells when we're, growing in the womb that haven't differentiated into cardiac cells for your heart or muscle cells. Same with these undifferentiated cells in the meristem. They have not haven't developed into what they're specifically going to do yet, which is always kind of a good place to be. So you have the apical meristem, which produces growth increased in length, okay? And right here it has a picture, or it shows you right here where the apical meristem is, kind of right in this area. All right, then you have the lateral meristem, which increases the plant's diameter, okay? So that's secondary growth. So primary growth is length, and then the lateral meristem is the secondary growth that makes it a little bit wider and increase in diameter. And the flower development ultimately starts in the meristem. Okay, you have those undifferentiated cells that soon differentiate into things that basically allow the flower to develop. So it's very important to know kind of that plant growth, that it all starts with the meristems. Okay, all right, and then the glorious roots. So absorbs water and nutrients and stores them. That's very important. That's where plants get their nutrients, and that's where we get our nutrients. When we eat plants, we're eating the nutrients that's within the plant that actually comes from the soil. So it's interesting, this is kind of a little off topic, but our soil is becoming less nutrient dense, meaning we're not keeping the soil as fertile as we should, and we're depleting some of those minerals. So basically, the plants that we eat are nutrient deficient for us as well. They don't have the minerals that they need. So just so you guys know that, you know, plants feed us with the nutrients, especially those minerals that we get from the soil. But if the soil doesn't have them, the plants aren't going to have them either. Okay. So roots anchor the plant to the ground clearly. They hold soil in place. Again, I told you that before. They protect soil from bacteria, transport water and nutrients, and then provide upright support. So we've kind of gone over that. Now the fabulous leaf. So this is the main site of photosynthesis. They obviously consist of the blade, which is the thin flat section, leaf veins, which again we'll talk about a little bit, but transport different nutrients throughout the leaf and throughout the plant. And then the petiole, the stalk that attaches the stem to the blade. So those are the three major parts of the leaf. Covered by an epidermis and a cuticle. So if you've ever noticed, if you take a look at a leaf, you kind of notice that there's a very shiny layer on it, and especially on the top side, you'll see that it's kind of shiny and it looks almost waxy. Well, basically, that's the epidermis and the cuticle. It creates a waterproof barrier that basically allows those plants to kind of withstand dry weather, or, you know, if they were to undergo a drought, they would survive a little bit longer, so to speak, okay? So they can be susceptible to extreme drying, obviously, if they didn't have that cuticle. Okay, plant tissue. So, again, like we talked about, and, well, I mentioned that plants have kind of a similar organizational system. We've talked about a little bit about cells, but let's talk about tissues. So plants have tissues as well, just like humans do. They have a dermal tissue, which is composed of epidermal cells. So the dermal tissue is kind of this outer coating here that is more for protection. The ground tissue is this middle layer here, and then you have the vascular tissue. Vascular means kind of veins, and whenever you think of vascular, you're going to think of transporting things throughout, you know, this organism. Okay, so those three different types of tissues are absolutely necessary for the plant. Let's talk about the dermal tissue. So it's that thick, waxy layer again that I kind of told you about. Sometimes it's fuzzy. You'll notice that some leaves have this fuzziness to it. And then roots that have hairs, so that's actually for water absorption. It's the outer covering, and it's a single layer of cells, so it's actually a very thin layer of tissue. So when we break it down, we have the cuticle, which is that waxy coating that keeps water in. It's that waterproof barrier. You have guard cells. These guard cells are two cells located on each side of the stomata. And I'll get to the stomata because right down here, the stomata is an opening in the epidermis, and it's usually located on the underside of leaves, okay? And there, the exchange of gases occurs, because remember, in photosynthesis needs carbon dioxide and in order to undergo photosynthesis, and then one of the products is oxygen. So that exchange of gases happens in the stomata. Well, these guard cells basically closes and opens the stomata. You don't want the stomatas always open, because think about it. Sometimes water can evaporate out of the stomata and then you could dry out. So those guard cells can close it up in case maybe it's a dry condition and it needs to keep all the water in that's, you know, necessary. Okay? And then you have trichomes, leaf hairs that can shade a plant, keep predators away. So those are like kind of little fuzzy, kind of little projections off of the leaf that actually can keep a plant cool, believe it or not. And then some predators don't like to eat it because it's like, can you imagine eating a big furry hairball? Yummy. So that's kind of one of the main things for the trichomes. Okay, the ground tissue, again, that inner layer. So there's the ground tissue right here. The cells between the dermal and the vascular layer. Here are my favorite words to say. There's different ways to say these, so you can call this the parenchyma or the parenchyma. The parenchyma cells are thin cell walls, they have thin cell walls, thin cell walls, large vacuoles, and they carry out photosynthesis. Now, just so you guys know, all of these different types of cells are found in the ground tissue, okay? Collenchyma are strong, thicker, flexible cell walls, and they support the stem's weight. So this type of cell is basically for support. And then the sclerenchyma are extremely thick, rigid cell walls, but they are dead at the cell's maturity. So this is what we know as fiber. So remember that all the plants, when we eat plants, any kind of vegetables, we're getting a lot of fiber in our diet because of the sclerenchyma. But that fiber is very important again for support. But just so you know that those are the only cells that are actually dead at maturity. The collenchyma and the parenchyma cells are still fully alive and functioning at maturity. But the sclerenchyma, that fiber, is actually a dead tissue upon maturity. Okay? So that's the ground tissue. And then the vascular tissue transports food, water, hormones, and minerals throughout the plant. That vascular tissue includes the xylem and phloem, which you guys have all, I'm sure, heard about. Maybe in 5th grade, 4th grade, you talked about xylem and phloem, those terms that you kind of will never forget, but you're kind of like, what do they do again? So these, again, are the vascular system of the plant. So those vessels that transport food and water and nutrients, okay? The cambium is the lateral meristem. Remember, it basically allows that plant to widen, but also the cambium gives rise to bark on trees. So if we're talking about trees, this lateral meristem, which is the cambium tissue, gives rise to the bark, and that's what allows the bark to kind of grow. Okay, so the sap, sorry, I am being sappy, don't be sappy, but the sap is the fluid carried inside the xylem or the phloem, and sometimes that kind of leaks out of the tree, which is a good thing. So a lot of you guys have noticed in Colorado there's a lot of beetle kill. One of the reasons, this isn't the only reason, but one of the reasons for beetle kill is that there is a lack of water. And if there's a lack of water or a drought, then the trees cannot basically produce that sap and keep bugs out. So if it's not producing sap, so if you see sap on a tree, that's really healthy actually, but that can keep bugs out. And if there's no sap, bugs can burrow their way in and start to kill off the tree, okay? So sap is that fluid that's carried within the xylem and the phloem, okay? All right, so let's go into some specifics and then we'll take a break and come back for the next part. So xylem. Xylem carries water and minerals upward from the roots to the leaves, okay? So these xylem cells, and these xylem kind of tissue, again, it's a vascular system, so I should say they're kind of vessels. They are going to carry kind of up, okay? Carries water and minerals up from the roots to the leaves. So typically you're never really going to see xylem flowing down because all of the minerals in the water are coming from that root system. So they're going to make their way up throughout the whole tree. They're also used for structural support, and they're pretty much dead. Those are dead cells, which is kind of interesting, okay? So you can see this is kind of what xylem cells look like. So they are dead cells. There are two types of cells, the tracheid, which are long, narrow cells. The walls are connected to neighboring cells and they will eventually die. And then you have the vessel element, which is wider than the tracheids, but they only occur in flowering plants. I'm not going to test you on those, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention that you can get onto a more cellular level when we talk about the xylem and the phloem. So let's talk about the phloem. The phloem carries sugars made by photosynthesis from the leaves to wherever they need to be stored. So sometimes that sugar is stored in the roots, remember? So sometimes that phloem will carry sugars down or up to wherever it's needed. These cells are alive. So xylem cells, dead, phloem cells, alive, okay? So keep that in mind because that is an important feature, that the xylem cells, dead, phloem cells are alive, okay? And a little bit more on these, the sieve cells. These are arranged end to end, okay? So when we notice the phloem here, these are the sieve cells, and they are just end to end, okay? They pump sugars and other foods kind of either to up direction or down, depending on where those sugars are needed. And then you have companion cells, okay? These companion cells are kind of on the outside here. These companion cells They surround the sieve cells, they support the phloem cells, so they give it support as it's transporting that sugar to different places in the plant. Okay? Alright, so we are going to take a pause for a moment, go grab a drink, but I am going to pause this and we're going to come back for part 2 of the plant cells, okay? Or not plant cells, of the plant structure. Alright, we'll see you soon.